My final call as a police dispatcher has scarred me. I'd worked as a police dispatcher for 9 years of my life. It's a career that takes a level of mental fortitude that I don't think many possess. I used to hate saying stuff like that, always thought it sounded so pretentious. But the truth is, it takes a special type of person to be willing to voluntarily listen to some of the things we have to hear every single day. Don't get me wrong, the job wasn't always grim, and it even had its decent moments. I've got enough decently funny drunk 911 call stories to last me several lifetimes, though the reality of the job was usually far darker. I understood that though, and felt that I was more than equipped to deal with anything the job could throw at me. I was right for a while. For years I had answered every call, always able to keep a steady head despite being faced with some horrific situations, my confidence in my ability to handle the job unwavering. Until the final call I ever took as a police dispatcher. I glanced at the time displayed at the corner of my computer screen, 11:43. I yawned, leaning backward in my chair with my arms extended as I stretched my back. I'd been at the desk since 3 in the afternoon, answering calls and dispatching officers as they were needed, which wasn't very often in this town. I lived in a little port town in Washington, about an hour or so out of Seattle, and though we weren't without our fair share of crime, our phones never rang off of the hook, which meant a lot of free time for me. I was always okay with that. As soul-wrenching as many of the calls could be, moments of respite were always more than welcome. A notification on my screen caught my attention, and in an instant, I had returned to my seat, headset on. 911, what is your emergency? I spoke into my headset as automatically as any line repeated hundreds or thousands of times can be spoken. For a moment, the line was only dead silence before I heard a reply. I need policemen. I think somebody is in my house, a child whispered from the other line. I felt the smallest of knots beginning to form in my stomach. I shifted in my seat. Do you know your address? I asked, adopting a firm but lighter tone in response to the caller's age. I heard shuffling and heavy breathing from the other end, followed by a faint wait. The caller returned and whispered their address. She was a little girl by the sounds of her voice, and she sounded scared. Good job. What about your phone number? The process repeated, and I quickly relayed her information to dispatched officers. Her address was on the edge of town, a little out of the way, and I understood that it may be a while before help arrived. I stifled a sigh, not wanting to vocalize my worry as I received an estimated arrival time. Is there an adult with you in the house? I continued. No, the little girl replied breathlessly, and I could hear the anxiety rising in her voice as she spoke. My mom works late, and my sister There was a pause, followed by an audible sniffle. She's camping with her friends and, somewhere on her end of the line, there was a crash. Then a scream. My heart dropped. Are you still there? Are you all right? There was a repetitive thumping sound followed by the slam of a door. I'm here. The little girl spoke breathlessly into the phone. Are you all right? I repeated the question. Yes, was all she replied, barely above a whisper. Her tone worried me. She sounded more than afraid. Sad? No, disturbed was the proper word for it. Then she began to cry. Not as quiet as you would expect given her situation, but a deep, helpless sob that made my heart sink. When she spoke, it stopped altogether. Please, please, please help me. Her sobs turned into a hysteric cry, and I could hear loud repetitive thumps from her end. Footsteps, and they were clearly not hers. They were heavy, far too heavy for a little girl. Without warning, a shrill cry, like the sound of microphone feedback, rang through my headsets. The sudden assault on my ears caused me to jump, and my heart set off to racing like a jackrabbit. I fought the instinct to throw the headset off, and instead clenched my eyes shut as the noise faded as suddenly as it had come. I saw it, she sputtered through sobs. Oh, please, please, I don't know what it is. The frantic and frenzied nature of her begging increased, and a strangeness began to settle in the air that I couldn't quite place. A quick glance around the room confirmed that most of the desks around me were empty, and I was on the call alone. The thought made me feel very isolated, and a growing uneasiness continued to take hold of me that I couldn't place. Something about the call just felt wrong. Police are on the way, I began. I tried to infuse the statement with my usual level of assertiveness and confidence, but I worried that the uneasiness may be audible in my voice. Can you tell me your name? I asked. Amber. All right, Amber, are you or can you get somewhere safe? A room with a door you can lock? I'm in my room, she said through sniffles, and it was obvious that she had been crying profusely. I locked the door. Good. I'm gonna stay with you on the line. Is there anywhere for you to hide? The sound of footsteps grew in the background, as her voice lowered to a whisper. I think under the bed, she whimpered. Okay, is there? I paused, thinking over my words before continuing. Anything you can use to protect yourself? There was silence on her end for a moment, followed by a hushed yes. As she dropped the phone, I assumed to get a weapon. The clamor from within the house had grown closer to the phone, and the piercing ringing sound had returned. I was almost certain there had to be something wrong with my headset or with Amber's phone, and the sound grew to an almost unbearable extent, matched only by deafening thuds from somewhere on the phone. It sounded too close. I could feel the hairs begin to rise on the back of my neck, and the ominous sense of panic began to give way to an unexplained fear. The urge to look over my shoulder grew harder to fight as the persistent thudding sound grew louder, nearer. It all sounded too clear, I guess. There was no static, none of the white noise typical of a phone call, nothing. Just the sound of footsteps approaching closer. Closer. I gave in to my instinct, whipping around in my seat, nearly losing my headset. No one. I had no time to settle my nerves as Amber returned to the line. "Are you there?" she whispered, yanking me from my fog and back into the moment. Yes, I replied. I struggled to shake off my fears. Something was very wrong with this situation. Despite my worries, I shifted my attention back to Amber. There isn't any weapon," the girl muttered, "but I have something." There was a pause. "Oh, okay, what do you have?" I asked, realizing my prompt was necessary. A rabbit." "A pink rabbit," she said, and even over the phone, I could hear a little embarrassment. "My dad gave her to me when I was little," she sniffled. He said she would keep me safe." I didn't know what to say for a moment, but didn't want to miss a beat. "He was right," I said, as encouragingly as I could. "Everyone knows pink bunnies are great protection. Can you go back under—" I was interrupted. "Amber, I miss you." I could hear a man call from within the house. So the intruder knew her? I furrowed my brow. "Amber, do you recognize that voice?" I asked, hoping she could identify the intruder. There was silence for a moment before her response. It sounds like my dad." "Why does it sound like my dad?" I blinked. "What do you mean?" "That's my daddy's voice." "Why does it have my daddy's voice?" I didn't know how to respond to that. Hell, I didn't know what to think about. At his voice? Before I could ask what she meant, we were interrupted by a sound. The thing we heard has taken me years to try to understand. I've come to believe it was that thing's laugh. At the time, though, we couldn't know. It was the sound of metal crunching in a car accident as it met flesh, a wet, grinding shriek that shook me to my core. I wanted to vomit, and my vision began to blur. I can only imagine what it was like for Amber, hearing that all in person. "Amber," I panted, my senses returning to me all at once. She barely had time to respond before we heard it. A voice, or voices, calling for her from somewhere nearby. They spoke as one, all with the same odd, inhumane nature, dripping with malintent. "Amber," my blood froze. Amber began to cry, and her cries eventually becoming pleas as she begged for help, her life, her mother, and my intervention. Five more minutes. Just 5 more minutes, I muttered, mentally cursing the timer, which displayed the estimated arrival time of the dispatched officers. I prayed it would be soon enough. "It's outside the room," she whispered, her voice one of utter panic, before breaking into a quiet sob. I silently swore under my breath. "Amber, I need you to hide right now if possible. The police are 3 minutes away. Stay as quiet as possible." There was no response, but I assumed from the shuffling sounds I could hear that she had gone back under the bed. For a few moments there was silence. Then Amber spoke, and my heart dropped. "I'm going to die." "You are not going to die, Amber," I began, worry now audible in my voice. "I promise." It's reaching under the door. Oh my God," she muttered. There was a crash louder than before, and Amber began to shriek. The noises continued, and it began to dawn on me what I was hearing. It was breaking down the bedroom door. Amber's screams had devolved into horrified babbling and pleas for her life to whatever was on the other side of the door. Her screams were soon drowned out by the same noise as before, that sick fucking laughter. "What are you?" Amber shrieked, loud enough to make my ears ring. "Please, what are you? What are you?" It mocked, in a voice that was some sick parody of Amber's. Panic gripped me as I glanced back at the corner of the monitor displaying the dispatched unit's arrival time. 1:36. Please, God, let it be soon enough. "Amber, are you there?" I called. "Amber." As suddenly as it had started, everything went silent. Somewhere in the distance I heard sirens. "I hear them, Amber. Officers are a minute away." Silence. My heart began to sink. "Amber, are you there?" I could hear something shifting, breathing. I think it's gone," Amber said. A surge of relief rolled through me, and I let out a sigh and leaned back in the chair. 27 seconds, the dispatch time read, and the sirens in the background grew louder. "You did very well, Amber. Police are almost there. You did really well." I couldn't think of what else to say. I'd never had a call like this, and something about it all felt so strange. Something Amber had said began to ring in my mind. "What are you?" "Amber," I began. "What did you see?" I was met with silence. "Amber?" Amber began to laugh. "Amber," I said, my voice pleading, a wave of realization crashing down on me. The laughter grew more raucous and less human with every second. Somewhere in the background, there was a knocking sound. They'd finally arrived. Too late. I asked the only thing I could think at the moment. Why? The laughter stopped abruptly as the thing on the phone spoke. It was fun. There was a click, and the line went dead. The house was empty when officers arrived. No signs of forced entry anywhere except the door to Amber's bedroom, the bottom of which had been torn away by something leaving a wide space to crawl beneath. and Amber, or what was left of her, decorated the room. Whatever had been there left nothing behind to identify it, only carnage. The case was never officially closed, and everyone had their theories as to what had happened that day, ranging from serial killers to a bear attack, and everything in between. The call was never made public, not my decision, but not one I necessarily complained about either. I never want to hear that recording again. I put in my 2 weeks' notice that same night, though I never returned to work after that day. I'd been content to try and forget about that call. As callous as it may sound, I was content trying to forget about Amber, to forget whatever I had spoken to on that phone, but I don't think it's done with me. Last night I dreamed, or had thought I was dreaming, the sounds of footsteps running throughout my house, as something screeched and laughed and mocked me just outside my bedroom door. I stayed in my bed long into the morning despite the sounds having stopped, paralyzed by a mixture of fear and confusion, until eventually I convinced myself to leave the bed. I crossed the room, cursing every creak the floor made under my weight. I lowered myself to the ground, holding my breath as I peered under my bedroom door. There was something there, but it wasn't moving. I mustered up the little bravery I had left and rose to my feet, my eyes shut tight and a prayer on my lips. I pulled open my bedroom door slightly and stuck my head out just enough to see what lay outside. I stifled a gasp, and tears flooded my eyes as I bent over to pick up the object. Placed right outside my door was a little pink bunny, covered in dark stains. From somewhere within the darkness just beyond the bedroom door, Amber's laughter echoed. I'm a former police officer. There's one call my partner and I took that I'll never forget. I'm Jay Miles, and I want to share with you a story that's stuck with me for years. I joined the force many decades ago. It was my redemptive way of giving back to society. When I was younger, in my mid-20s, I committed petty crimes in a desperate attempt to fit in. The culture at the time was one that admired bad boys, and having a record was cool to most people. I grew out of that. I was partnerless for some of the 911 calls I responded to, and I'm just thankful to whatever being exists out there that I had a partner for this call in particular. Our police cruiser was parked in a dark alleyway, tucked between its brick walls so as to catch speeding drivers. It was around 1 a.m. when we received the dispatch. Someone called about a woman who was walking the streets barefoot with her baby while murmuring things to herself. That's all we were told. We arrived at the scene. My partner Rob and I were on edge the moment we got there, not least because Cinder Valley was a notoriously bad neighborhood. After circling the area a few times, the woman was nowhere to be found, so we decided to park the cruiser and knock on some doors. The 911 caller was anonymous, so we weren't able to speak with them directly. Most folks were asleep at that hour, and we had to settle for whoever happened to be walking the streets that night. You see that? Said Rob. Someone disappeared behind a wooden gate by a house and we just missed them. Rob and I jogged over to see if we could get to this person, our possible suspect. I could see folks in their homes peeking through curtains, staring curiously at two cops running around in their neighborhood. It looked like the suspect entered someone's backyard through an opened gate, so we flipped on our flashlights and followed. The backyard was pitch black, and we couldn't see anything that wasn't within the narrow beams of our flashlights. I noticed my partner's light was shaking mildly. You okay? I asked him. I'm fine. It's okay to be scared, man, I said, chuckling. Fuck off. A rusty swing set moved at the wind, and the trees around us sounded their leaves. My body shivered, not at the cold breeze, but at the atmosphere. If I was unsettled, I could only imagine how much more my partner was. Excuse me, sir. The homeowner suddenly opened her backyard door. Sorry, ma'am, I said. We'll be off your property in no time. Didn't mean to scare you. My partner and I are looking for a woman who was reported. Officer, I can't hear too well. Would you mind coming inside? I went inside to speak with the homeowner while Rob continued searching the backyard. I explained that we were looking for a woman who was behaving strangely and walking around the neighborhood with a baby in hand. While talking with the homeowner, Rob screamed from outside. You okay? What happened? I asked. It looked as if he had witnessed a ghost appear before his very eyes, then vanish into thin air. I saw her. The woman? What did she look like? Come on, Rob. Talk. He took a moment and caught his breath, with his hand over his heart. She ran up the wall. Right in front of me. She ran up that wall, Jay. Like an animal. He pointed at the two-story house. I didn't know what to make of that. Rob didn't have a history of mental illness that I was aware of, and he certainly wasn't on drugs. I knew him, and I knew him for a comfortable amount of time to be able to say with confidence that he would never make things up, especially when it was serious, like police work. Well, I began awkwardly. Did you see which way she went after she climbed the wall? The bushes over that metal gate there, he said, flashing his light at it. I saw them moving. With our guns drawn, we hopped over the gate and searched the next-door neighbor's property. Wait, said Rob. I heard you call for backup. Shouldn't we wait for them? No, we can do this just us two. This backyard was even bigger than the other, but it was just as dark. We aimed our flashlights at a wooden shed sitting at the corner of the yard, and before we took another step towards it, we heard someone crying. It sounded like a baby. Police! I knocked down the door of the shed and we cleared the inside. The woman was not there, but there was a baby, a plastic one. Rob pointed his light on the ground of the shed. The hell is this? A mechanical baby doll that could play recorded sounds, placed there by someone for the purpose of luring people, was not something that sat right with me. Not a moment after that, our ears rang at a blood-curdling, high-pitched scream coming from the first house whose backyard we searched. As I dashed back to the other house, I noticed Rob wasn't following. He wasn't even moving. "Let's go! What the hell are you doing?" I yelled. Rob's eyes widened as he glared at me, his mouth agape. I can't. I just can't, Jay. Sorry. I didn't have time to argue with him, so I continued on and hopped over the gate and entered the old woman's house. "What's wrong?" I asked her. "I saw her. She was right there." The old woman pointed outside to her backyard, at a spot on the ground that was just by the glass door. She was just there, just standing and looking at me, and I think she smiled. "Okay, which way did she?" Another scream. Rob's. By the time I made it back over to the shed, Rob was nowhere to be found. The plastic baby was gone too. I called out for him and looked everywhere, but he was simply gone. You know, it was like this mysterious woman could smell fear. It's something she seemed to prey on, and Rob had plenty of it that night. When backup finally arrived, I explained to my higher-ups at least a few hundred times what had transpired. This all took place decades ago, and Rob hasn't been found since. It's a cold case. When I think back on this night, it shivers my spine like nothing else. That mysterious woman, she was playing a game with the two of us, and it feels like she won from experience. I'm not even sure why I'm still referring to her as a woman, as a human being, because if Rob's description of her is any indication, she was something else. A full year passed by, and I went through different partners. I was stationed in the same city, and sometimes my new partner John and I had to report to calls that came from Cinder Valley. Eventually, I almost forgot about it all, but I never forgot Rob, wherever he was, dead or alive. That didn't last long. One night, while sitting in our cruiser, John and I received a dispatch. It seemed like another ordinary call, until the operator mentioned something about a woman talking to herself on the street with a crying baby in hand. "I'm a former police officer. It's time to share the most disturbing case I've handled. I'm going to share a few stories with you. One by one, though, because if I was overwhelmed by them, I have a feeling you kids will be too. I'm Officer Bradley. I retired from the force 10 years ago at the ripe age of 50. I'll begin with a story from my 20 years as a police officer that's stuck with me like a deep thorn. January 17th, 2005, we got a call about a woman who had locked herself in her bathroom. She said her boyfriend was trying to kill her. My partner Mason and I arrived at a house on the end of a street. The lamppost flickered yellow, and the wind danced the trees and bushes. The clouds were thick and the air ice cold. We took position at the front door. We knocked. "Police, open up." Only the sound of wind chimes. Mason kicked the door open with all the force he could muster. We scanned the house downstairs. No one in sight. "Clear. You hear that?" I said. Mason looked up at the stairs. Gentle cries. A woman. So subtle and as if muffled behind a door, in a room. "Thought she was supposed to be downstairs," said Mason. We made our way upstairs. "Ma'am?" "It's okay," I began. "You're safe now. No one's going to hurt you." The crying stopped abruptly, as if someone hit pause, then it started again. "But he's still here," replied the woman from inside the bedroom. My partner and I checked the entire house. "No one's here, ma'am. You're safe." Downstairs, the front door slammed shut. My partner and I gave each other a gaze, and I could notice his brow sweating despite the cold night. I used my head to gesture for him to take a look. He stood from atop the stairs and looked down at the front door. "Just the wind, I think," he said. Then a gentle voice came from inside the bathroom. "Are you sure, Officer Bradley?" the woman asked. The entire night at that scene, neither my partner Mason nor I used our names out loud. Not once. "Ma'am, do you need help or not?" Mason was agitated. "We need to know you're okay, so step back because I'm kicking it in." A part of me believes Mason was more eager to see the woman's face, to find out who she was and how she knew what she did, than he was for her safety. He wanted peace of mind. "No, hold on, I said. "She might be sitting right by the door. We don't want to hurt her." Then she said it. "Officer Bradley, tell Mason that if he touches this door, I will visit his family in the late hours of a certain night and break down a door of my own." The woman's voice was an octave deeper when she said that. I never understood the expression, "white as a ghost." Do people actually turn that pale in the face? I learned that they in fact did when I saw my partner react to those sinister words. I couldn't stop him from kicking in that bedroom door this time. But when he did, we found nobody inside. There wasn't a window above the shower through which to escape or another door to go through. And yet, we were certain that we just had a full conversation with a woman behind this door. We scanned the entire house, including the backyard, one last time, inch by inch. Nothing. My partner and I communicated non-verbally the rest of the night. So when it was time to leave, we gave each other a look and left the house without even looking back. Now this is the part of the story I haven't told anyone. Not even Mason. We were sufficiently disturbed, so I didn't want to tell him what I'm about to tell you. When we left the house, I drove us back to the station that night. He probably thought I didn't notice, but his hands were shaking too much to drive comfortably. He doesn't drink coffee. As I reversed the cruiser out the street, Mason didn't look back at the house. But the truth is, I did. And I sincerely wish that I hadn't. I looked and squinted at a garbage can by the side of the house to see a strange dark figure kneeling by the gate as if watching us leave. And as we finally drove away, as the house became more and more distant in our mirror, the figure slowly stood itself up. And I'll swear even today that as it stood up, it didn't stop rising until its head peeked over the roof of that 2-story house. The reason I quit the police. I have been a member of the New South Wales Police Force for 33 years, and what I witnessed on this night was something I know I will never get rid of from my mind and will most likely be with me until the day I die. It was about 2:25 a.m. on a quiet Thursday evening, and my shift was ending at 3:00 a.m., which meant I was in a good mood as the shift had been relatively easy. That was until I was assigned a job to investigate reports of screaming and distressed cries of help from a property surrounded by bushland. Now the calls to investigate this property were frequent, and I assumed it would go how it always did. I would arrive with my flashing, blue and red lights, no sirens, and drive down the driveway to witness a rather large house surrounded by dense bush and trees. No lights would be visible as the house was unoccupied due to the owners going missing a few years earlier. I told my partner, Matthew, not his real name, that we had been called to the house again. "Let's go there, find nothing, and report back," he said, grabbing his hat and gulping down the last of his lukewarm tea. Fast forward 20 minutes to 2:45 a.m. and we arrived at the gates which separated the already hidden house from the road. We slowly drove down the long driveway, observing the trees on either side of us to ensure all way calm. It was silent. There was no action of any sort on the driveway, and we found nothing at the house. At least, that's what we thought would happen. On this night, there was an eerie feeling creeping up on us as we drew closer to the house. Matthew was ready to radio our commanding officer the news that nothing was amiss until we arrived at the other side of the driveway. The house stood there, silent and proud, shrouded as always, yet unlike the other jobs here, there was a light on in the living room. We ensured our tasers were ready to go in the event of an aggressive intruder and got out of the police car, leaving the headlights on and pointed at the house. The front door is still locked and no windows appear to be damaged. Matthew whispered, eyeing the single light in the living room. We simultaneously approached the front door and knocked with a heavy thud. Nothing. We knocked a second time, hoping the occupants didn't hear the first knock, and still there was nothing. This is where it gets creepy. Upon knocking for a third time, Matthew went stiff as a statue began shaking. "What? What can you see?" I stopped. I could feel goosebumps forming on my arms. Peering out a window from the second floor was a person. A woman wearing a white gown was staring down at us. We couldn't see her clearly as the window was foggy, but we knew it was a woman aged around 21. Matthew was petrified, and I can't blame him for being so. I called out to the woman and demanded she open the front door. She stared for a few more moments and turned around and walked off. We could hear footsteps coming down the rickety staircase on the other side of the door and braced ourselves to stand face to face with the woman. Then it all went silent as it once was. Matthew put a hand on his radio and notified the commander that there was a possible intruder and we needed an extra car as support. Before the commander answered, an almighty bang ricocheted through the house. It sounded like a gunshot, so Matthew and I hightailed it back to the car and took cover behind it against the boot trunk. Matthew turned his head to me after looking back at the house as more bangs followed. I was texting my wife that there were gunshots possible, and I loved her. Paul, you need to look now," Matthew said to me. The fear was amplified through his voice as he said this. I slowly peeked around the side of the car and almost shrieked at what I saw. The living room light was off, but now the entire second floor was illuminated by a green light, a bright green light. We studied it, slowly calming ourselves and reassuring one another that backup was coming. The banging stopped, and when we were ready, we ventured very slowly back towards the house, almost crawling. As we got to the front porch, we heard another sound. Not a footstep or a loud bang. This sound was a blood-curdling scream that has stuck with me to this day. We couldn't wait any longer for backup. We breached the front door, guns drawn, and followed the source of the screaming together. We dare not split up in a place like this. Not tonight. We went upstairs ever so slowly, not blinking and hyper-vigilant of our surroundings. The green light was coming from the room we saw the woman. As I neared the door, Matthew bumped a bass and it fell with a loud crack. The second it hit the ground, we heard a male voice yelling to us. Hey, what are you doing here?" He yelled. "My name is Senior Constable Cooper of Junee Police. Show yourself," I yelled firmly. "You have no idea what you have stumbled across, Senior Constable," the man said, thumping something prompting more screams. I said nothing and readied myself for the other side. I have the door one hard kick and it came tumbling down. Inside was a circle of blood, 15 to 20 green candles, and a white gown that looked brand new. There was no sign of anyone in the room at the time, and we were certain the screams and talking came from here. "What the fuck is this?" I said once again, turning to face Matthew. But Matthew was nowhere to be seen. "Matthew!" I called a dozen times to no avail. I could hear sirens in the distance, and as I looked out the window, I could see distinct red and blue flashing lights through the trees. Backup was here, but Matthew was not. For the next 35 minutes, I searched the house from top to bottom for Matthew with the 3 officers that had just arrived. I ventured down into a cellar under the kitchen and found something that haunts me to this day. Matthew's credentials identifying him as a member of the New South Wales Police, as well as his gun and 3 bloody fingers placed neatly on the ground. I screamed at the top of my lungs for the other officers to come to me and call for forensics, and virtually everyone available at the time. By the time I got home, it was 5:30 a.m. and the sun was rising. Matthew was never seen again, nor did forensics find any trace of him. The fingers found were identified as his, 2 of them were. The 3rd was unknown and remains unknown to this day. It took me 45 minutes after getting home to decide to resign effective immediately. It has been 10 years since that night, to this day, November 21, and I still hear the screams of that woman and the distinct voice that warned me in that house. Please, if you ever hear screaming in the middle of the night, call the proper law enforcement. Do not venture by yourself to investigate. The first thing you should know about me is I'm not one of those kinds of cops. That's important. Real important. I read the stories, same as you guys. Mouth-breathing goons who strangle guys in the street. Thugs shooting tear gas at peaceful protesters. Borderline psychos who think they're Dirty Harry when they gun down some poor homeless fucker under a bridge. That's not my bag. Never has been. I mean, don't get me wrong, we had a couple of guys like that. Every department does. And yeah, they'd get a little rough some days. Maybe leave a body or 2, and the brass would look the other way. But that's the thing, see, I had the opportunity to be one of those guys, and I chose a different path. I was, and this'll sound corny as fuck, I know, but I was the upstanding type. Man of integrity, defender of the public trust. One of the good guys, you know? Superman, that's what the captain used to call me. He was serious too. Fuckers in the department thought it was funny as hell and the nickname stuck. But I always liked it. Even when they were making fun of me, I took pride in that shit. Truth, justice, and the American way, you know? Scourge of crime, protector of the weak, defender of all that was good in the world. That's the kind of cop I was. I mean, I wasn't no fucking superhero or anything, but I did the job, and I did it well. I was the guy who'd stop to change your tire when you got a flat in the rain at 2 a.m. The guy who'd carry an old lady's groceries up 6 flights of stairs when the elevator was on the fritz. The guy who'd look the other way if you had a little bit of weed on you, and who knew how to calm a situation down, rather than use force as a first resort. These fucks, these morons today with goddamn war movie tanks and assault rifles shooting up a guy just for waving a pocket knife around, it makes me sick. A real cop, he knows how to talk a man down from the edge. He sees a guy flipping out and screaming, and he knows he just needs someone to talk to. That's who I was. I was the guy you could talk to. The cool cop, I guess you could say. Hell, I even rescued a kitten from a tree one time. No shit, kitten in a tree like a goddamn cartoon. Yeah, it was a good job. A damn good job. But it could get hard. You work the force, you see things it's hard to shake. Collar a guy for beating his wife and kids only to watch her defend his ass in court. See a family with 3 kids burned alive in their minivan, while the drunk in the other car walks away with a headache. Spend months putting a case together to pull some dealer scum off the street, only to see him walk because some dumbass clerk forgot to stamp the date on the warrant. Real justice ain't like the comic books, that's what I'm getting at. There ain't always a happy ending after Superman catches the bad guy. In real life, it's a lot more gray. A man can only take so much gray before it fucks with his head. You gotta find some way to cope. A lot of guys, they drank. Others went to the strip clubs, bought girls they could cry on, 1 or 2 off themselves. Me, I stayed clean. I had a reputation to uphold. Superman will have a Sprite. They joke when we went to the cop bars. Even when they joked, I liked it. I told you that already. But the gray was getting to me too. During the day, it was all right. Work my beats, file my paperwork, get home to the wife and kid. But at night, it was hard. I'd stare at the ceiling, my heart pounding like a goddamn motorcycle piston, afraid of I don't know what. When I would sleep, I'd get maybe an hour or 2 before I woke up, soaked in sweat, scared of something I couldn't even fucking remember. The wife wanted me to see a shrink, but that kind of noise makes its way around the department quick, and when the brass hears that you can't handle your shit like a man, you can kiss your chance at command goodbye. I guess it's kind of stupid now, talking about command. I was kicked off my beat a couple of years ago after an incident that made the papers. It was a whole fucking thing for a little while. Maybe you heard about it. This dealer, Zed Potch, he was involved in an altercation with a buyer and his girlfriend one night. Shit went bad, words were said. Potch took a knife and cut them both up. Partner and I arrived on the scene just as the knife came out. Saw the whole thing. Partner took off after Potch, and I stayed to help the victims. The girl died. The guy lived. She was pregnant, it turned out. and the papers picked it up. Sob story at first, your typical horrors of big city crime crap. But after it made the news, people started asking questions. Like, why did you save the white guy and not the black girl? Kind of questions. Bullshit. It was all such fucking bullshit. Bunch of guys in the department were black, my goddamn partner was black. That had nothing to do with it. Anyone will tell you, in all my years on the force, I never treated anyone different on account of their skin color. No matter who you were, what color, where you were from, whatever. If you were a part of my community, I swore an oath to protect you, and I did just that. The fact that she was black had nothing to do with it, I can tell you that much. But these little dipshits in the press, they don't care. They'd tar and feather their own grandmothers if it would sell a few more papers. They called me a racist and splashed it all over the tabloids until the captain took me aside and said it would be in the best interest of the department if you were temporarily reassigned. That's what he said. In the best interest of the department. What a fucking joke. They sent me off to some horsefucker town in the boonies, where the hottest action was old man Sutherland cracking a bottle of Jim Beam and getting naked in the cow pasture again. The wife left. She'd tried to say she couldn't handle the stress of the new life, but when I called bullshit, she said that she didn't want to raise our daughter in an environment of hate. Can you believe that? 15 years of marriage, 15 years and I never spoke a hateful word, and she took the goddamn newspaper's side over mine. It's not great. I'm not going to lie to you. It's not great these days. You take a man's life away, then give him a whole lot of time to think about it. That's not a recipe for good days. I think about my old beat, my wife, my kid. Christ, she must be a senior in college by now. But mostly I think about that night. Here's the thing you have to understand. Zed Potch was fucking scum. Most guys who go crooked, they're just kids who make a dumb mistake or two. Poor kids growing up in some shithole part of town. No real jobs to get their lives on track. I mean, I'm not making excuses for them or anything, but I understand where they're coming from. Hell, if I had their row to hoe, I'd probably be boosting cars and slanging dope too. But guys like Potch are something else. Potch, it's hard to imagine him being anything other than a dirtbag no matter kind of life he was born into. He did his first stint in juvie when he was 10 years old for fucking up some older kid in a street fight. And I mean, he fucked him up. Kid was twice Potch's size, but Potch broke the kid's arm, shattered his nose, cracked his goddamn ribs. I heard when the responding officers found him, he was sitting on the kid's chest and knocking the kid's teeth back into his throat with a chunk of sidewalk concrete. Had this big fucking smile on his face, like Christmas morning. Think about that. Anyway, that was the beginning of Potch's long association with the police department. We picked him up on almost a monthly basis for all kinds of shit. Armed robbery, B&E, sexual assault, drugs. But no matter how hard we tried, we could never get anything to stick. I mean, he wasn't some criminal mastermind or anything like that, but he was a slippery fucker and very, very lucky. A key witness wouldn't testify, or a piece of evidence was deemed inadmissible, or the bleeding hearts in the jury would take his side. Whatever it was, the outcome was always the same. Potch was back on the street, and I slept a little less easy. Potch was always a low-level thug, but he wasn't without ambition. Around the time of the incident, we'd started seeing major drug movement in the city. Hard stuff, scary stuff, real cartel-level shit. I guess Potch figured it was finally his moment, because he got in with the pushers in a big way. He started moving product for the cartels, earning their trust, making coin. Son of a bitch started driving around in a shiny new Escalade. That pissed me off. I could barely keep my little sedan from falling off its wheels, and this fucking parasite was driving an Escalade. The night it happened, it was raining. I remember that. Raining like a motherfucker. There was a flood advisory in the city, and the streets were pretty much empty. Partner and I were in the car, keeping an eye on the traffic down Jameson Street. Fucking lot of good it was doing. When we couldn't see out of the windows on account of the rain, I saw maybe one car in 2 hours, and that poor bastard was going about 10 miles an hour in the storm. But there wasn't Jack coming from dispatch either, so we sat. Hell of a night, my partner said after a while. Tell me about it, I said. On the upside, maybe the rain will keep people indoors. Maybe. Kinda keep things low-key, for tonight at least. My head wasn't in a good place. I hadn't slept in a few days. Too many nightmares, running from something and not remembering what it was when I woke up. I could use a quiet night, you know what I'm saying? Partner shook his head. Nah, not me. Quiet nights are the worst ones. How's that? When shit is crazy, at least you know what you're dealing with, he said. We get a call, we roll out, we assess the situation, we respond, follow the rules, and hopefully no one gets hurt. But here, the waiting for whatever is going to happen, that's a lot worse than being in the shit. To me, anyway. At least in the shit you don't have this dread of, like, what the fuck's gonna go down tonight? You know? The dread, I can't take it. I remember that little speech real well. It stuck with me for some reason, maybe because of what happened next. Dispatch came over the radio. 315, come in. I hopped on. 315 here, over. We've got a call about a 415 disturbance in progress at the corner of Washington and Church Street. Please respond, over." "We're on it," I said. I flipped on the sirens and turned to my partner. "There, dread's over. We're in the shit now. Happy?" "Hit it, Superman," he said. By the time we got there, I swear to God, it was raining even harder than before, like nothing I ever seen. A real biblical fucking downpour, that's how bad it was. The place was a used car lot on the south side, this scuzzy, fenced-in dump the pushers like to use for deals sometimes. It was dark as shit and the car's windows were all fogged to hell. I couldn't see a thing until the lightning struck. This big, bright purple bolt flashed a few 100 feet away, lit the whole lot like a firework for a few seconds. It was enough. I saw Potch, with that dopey blue Knicks hat he always wore. I saw 2 other people, flailing in the rain, and I saw the knife. "Call for backup," I said, jumping out of the car. I was already across the street and over the fence by the time Potch noticed me. That's how bad the rain was. He took off, hoisting a heavy duffel bag up over his shoulder, and ran his ass across the lot. I stopped to look at the victims. The guy was a skinny little dickbag in stained flannel with track marks up his arm. He'd taken a few shots to the face and hand, but nothing major. The girl, though, she was hurt. He'd gotten her good in the belly, and the blood was coming hard. I've got some basic first aid under my belt, and I can tell you it looked bad. Right away, I guessed he'd gotten her in an artery, maybe one of the major abdominal ones. The blood was pumping out of her, mixing with the splashes of rain on the pavement. I got down next to her and put pressure on the wound. The rain was freezing cold, but when I put my hands against her, the blood was hot enough to burn my damn palms. It was a big wound, ragged like he'd twisted the knife, and I had to push hard to get any chance of sealing it. My partner came up behind me, stopping cold when he saw the victims. "I got this," I said. "Go after Potch. Don't let the fucker get away." He nodded and took off, leaving me alone with them. The streetlight was dim, but I could see the girl's face. Her eyes were closed, but her face was all twisted and scared looking. She was just a kid, maybe 15 years old, all dolled up to look like a goddamn music video dancer or something. Girls like her, they get passed around by the pushers like toys, traded to grease business deals. Fucking disgusting, I'm telling you. Poor kid gets mixed up in the life, thinking some hotshot dealer boyfriend is going to pay her way out. He gets her high, buys her clothes, shows her his guns. She starts to think she's in love. Then she gets used up and tossed back in the gutter when he goes for someone younger. The shit she was wearing was trying to make her look fancy, sophisticated even. But laying there, unconscious, bleeding in the rain, she looked like such a fucking kid. A baby, practically. I got a daughter of my own. I told you that already. She wasn't much younger than this kid was, and it broke my heart. I started wondering how things like this can happen to children, how guys like Potch can fuck the world so badly. I looked up. I know, it sounds stupid, but I looked up. To heaven, to God, to whatever the fuck. I looked up, and I saw the camera. My heart just about shat its pants. A camera, sitting on a pole just a few feet away, pointed directly at us, little blinking red light like an answer to a prayer. Sons of bitches who owned the lot must have gotten sick of talking to cops every few weeks and put a camera up to scare off any unsavory characters. Potch, that moron, he must have not even seen it with the way the rain was coming down. The deal, the stabbing, the fucking thing saw all of it. We'd got him. Finally, after all this time, we were going to get him good. But I started thinking, were we really going to get him? I had no idea how much of the deal was on tape, and if my partner couldn't catch him, we'd probably lose the evidence. The 2 victims weren't exactly the kind of upstanding citizens who would persuade a jury to convict, if they even bothered to testify. And if the girl pulled through, the best we could get him for would be assault. A few years in the pen, and then he's back out, probably with some new business contacts for the experience. I don't know what it was. Maybe it was all the goddamn times we tried to stick something on him and lost. Maybe it was the way the girl reminded me of my daughter, or the way he drove that Escalade down the street, or that kid with his teeth knocked out all those years ago. Maybe it was because I hadn't slept in I don't know how long. Maybe it was the rain. But whatever it was, I wanted to end this guy's ass once and for all. It wasn't enough just to put him in for assault. We needed to get him for murder. I looked down at my hands, holding tight over the girl's wound. I'd managed to get a decent amount of pressure at the site, and the blood wasn't coming fast anymore. So I started to... Look, I'm not a monster, okay? I wanted to give her a fighting chance. I did. I'm sworn to protect people like her. But I figured, what good is saving someone's life if in the end it leads to a bunch more deaths? I was sure that Potch would kill again, grape again, pump poison into the city's veins again and again and again. But here was a chance to stop him. Take him out of the equation, save others in the city from suffering the same fate as this girl. So I let up on the pressure. Just a little bit. I mean, I was pretty sure she was a goner anyway, no matter what I did. You sever a major abdominal artery, it doesn't matter how quick the EMTs get to you, you're in the ground. I wasn't killing her. I was just letting fate take its course, you know? I knew the camera was still watching me, so I kept my hands at the sight. But I let up, just sort of rested my hands on her. I felt the blood, felt it start to gout up again, felt it come up between my fingers and coat the backs of my hands. Felt it start to slow as she bled out. But I kept my hands there, like I was comforting her. I decided it was better that way. I was going to be there for her, in her last moments. Sort of this touch of kindness and care, because I did care about her, really. In that moment I cared. "It's okay," I started saying. "You're going to be all right. Just relax and let it happen. We're going to get the guy who did this to you. I promise you that. Just relax." And I looked at her face. Her eyes were wide open. You're supposed to go unconscious when you bleed out, but she was staring at me, pain and fear and confusion all mixed up in her eyes, her face all twisted and shaking. I heard a boom of thunder giving way to a high-pitched wail. I became vaguely aware of sirens behind me, red lights flashing against the falling rain. I took my hands off her as the EMTs got to work. She never took her eyes off me, not even when they got her onto the stretcher and loaded her into the back of the ambulance. By then, she had a look of rage. I watched the ambulance drive away, then had a smoke in the car to calm down. I couldn't get that look of hers out of my mind. I could see it when I fucking blinked, I swear. I shot the shit with a backup for a bit to take my mind off it. My partner came back, saying he lost Potch in a back alley somewhere. We tried to get something out of the other victim, but he just kept mumbling, "Gimme lawyer." Word came over the radio that the girl died en route to the hospital. She never said a word. Partner put his hand on my shoulder when we got the news. "You did everything you could," he said, and for a second I almost decked him. Christ, I hate it when people say that. As we were packing up, I looked down at my hands and saw they were still sticky with blood. I held them in the rain, watched the water go from red to pink to nothing. Clean. I couldn't sleep again that night. Just sort of sat there on the bed, dazed, seeing her face in my mind every time I closed my eyes. I got to the station a few minutes later than usual the next day and found my partner suiting up in the locker room. I went right over to him, not even stopping to get my shit out of my locker. "Hey, let's check on the security footage from that camera overlooking the lot," I said. Jessup and Martinez got to it already. "Didn't you hear? They were there when the owner showed up at the fucking crack of dawn. Oh, good for them. What was on the tape?" "It was blank," he said. "What?" "The tape was blank. Power surge from the lightning strike barbecued the whole system. We got nothing. Too bad the girl didn't make it. Doesn't look like we're gonna get much from the other victim." I just stood there. I couldn't move. I couldn't think. I could only see her laying there in the back of the ambulance, her eyes locked on me, huge and wet and full of hate. "You okay?" my partner asked. "Yeah, I just need to step outside for a sec." I went down the street to Harrison's and sat at the bar. "What'll it be, Superman?" Harrison said. "Sprite before your shift? Bourbon? Neat?" Harrison raised his eyebrows. "Damn, fella, I don't think I ever seen you drink a real drink. Need something to take the pressure off?" "Yeah," I said. "Something like that." Potch walked. The survivor wouldn't talk to us, and the judge wouldn't even authorize the warrant. A glimpse of a Knicks hat in the rain apparently doesn't constitute a substantive description. It didn't matter anyway, because he was dead a couple weeks later, OD'd on his own supply. Stupid motherfucker. A few years after I left, I heard through the grapevine that my old partner ended up becoming captain. I was happy for him. Really, I was. I was going to call him to congratulate him, but fuck it, who needs the memories, right? But I do remember things. All the time. No matter how hard I try not to. When I'm not remembering, I drink. A lot. And when I'm not drinking, I dream. Still the same terror in the night, but at least now I know what I'm running from. Because it's the same dream every night. The rain, the pavement, the blood coming up out of the wound, coating my hands, the girl's eyes wide with fear and rage, purple lightning striping the sky. I hold my hands in the rain to wash the blood away. But in the dream, it doesn't come off.